Hello, beloveds. Spring has sprung, and hopefully you're enjoying this beautiful weather. Today's question begs an answer. Is Jesus white, Asian, black, or? This question leads to a deeper issue of whether race is a social construct. And if so, how does it affect who belongs where and doesn't? So I'm going to go over briefly a little bit about the race-based immigration law before a very important case that's in our current events. So race-based immigration law before Dow versus the United States. Race limitations to immigration originated with the Naturalization Act of 1790, which defined eligibility for citizenship as confined to any, quote, any alien. Ooh, I'm an alien. Being a free white person who shall have resided within the limits of the United States for a term of 2 years. While the abolition of slavery resulted in a codicil to this policy in 1870, granting people, air quote, of African nativity or African descent the right to naturalize. A series of prohibited laws, including the Page Act of 1875, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and the Alien Contract Labor Act of 1885, further restricted immigration from Asia based on race and class ideology. All right. The Chinese Exclusion Act, as noted by Eric Lee, is remarked for, air quote, establishing Chinese, categorized by their race, class, and gender relations as the ultimate category of undesirable immigrants. All right, that's a category. As the models by which the measure of the desirability in the air quote within the air quote whiteness of other immigrant groups is precisely this metric of air quote whiteness, which would be contested in dozens of court cases asserting the rights of immigrants who do not neatly fit into a black-white racial schema to naturalize. That's yours truly, and many of you out there. So on November 4th, 1909, George Shishim, which I could be pronouncing his name wrong, a Lebanese Christian LAPD police officer, LA police officer, a 25-year California resident, pleaded his naturalized U.S. citizenship case before Judge George H. Hutton. Although it seemed that George Shishim would lose the case on the basis of his air quote Arab identity, Shishim in his closing arguments blurted, "If I am Mongolian, then so is Jesus, because we come from the same lands," air quote. Since Christianity was an unofficial litmus test for naturalized U.S. citizenship, George Hutton ruled in George Shishim's favor and became the first naturalized U.S. citizen with an Arab cultural background and subsequently ruled, air quote, white by U.S. law. His famous words and legacy spawned others, such as George Dow, to fight for their rights, including Woo Kim Ark. All right, so United States versus Wong. Oh, sorry, I called him Woo. Wong Kim Ark, because he's bringing on the wheel. So this is in 1898. This is a landmark decision, which is being debated right now, of the U.S. Supreme Court, which held that air quote, a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent, who at the time of his birth are subjects of the Emperor of China, but have a permanent domicile and residence in the United States and are there carrying on business and are not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China, became, air quote, at the time of his birth, a citizen of the United States by the virtue of the first clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Wong Kim Ark, bring on the wheel, was the first Supreme Court case to decide on the status of children born in the United States to alien parents. I love this. It's like, are we not human? Anyway, this decision established an important precedent in the interpretation of the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Wong Kim Ark, who was born in San Francisco, had been denied re-entry to the United States after a trip abroad under the Chinese Exclusion Act. Sound familiar for those of you going through traveling these days and having to leave the airport by other means because of ICE? A law banning virtually all Chinese immigration and prohibiting Chinese immigrants from becoming naturalized U.S. citizens. He challenged the government's refusal to recognize his citizenship, and the Supreme Court ruled in his favor, holding the citizenship clause should be interpreted, air quote, in light of the common law. The case highlighted disagreements over the precise meaning of one phrase in a citizenship clause, namely the provision that a person born in the United States who is, air quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof acquires automatic citizenship. The Supreme Court's majority concluded that this phrase is referred to being required to obey U.S. law. On this basis, they interpreted the citizenship clause to grant citizenship to children born in the United States, with a limited set of exceptions based on English common law. The court, Anglican rule, basically the UK. The court held that being born to alien parents was not one of those exceptions. The court dissenters argued that being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States meant being subject to any foreign power. That is, not being claimed by a citizen by another country via, and I'm going to mispronounce this to all my legal friends, a jus sanguineus, inheriting citizenship from a parent. Interpretation, in the minority's view, would have excluded the air quote, the children of foreigners happen to be born to them while passing through the country. All right, now we get to George Dow versus the United States in 1915. This is the United States Court of Appeals Fourth Circuit, in which a Lebanese Maronite immigrant, George Dow, appealed two lower court decisions denying his application for naturalization as a U.S. citizen. Following the lower court decision in Ex parte Dow 1914 and Redow 1914, Dow versus the United States resulted in the circuit's court's affirmation of the petitioner's right to naturalize. In the words of the circuit judge Charles Albert Woods, air quote, on the generally received opinion that the inhabitants of a portion of Asia, including Syria, are to be classed as white persons. George Dow's gauntlet through the American legal system and the language with which his petition for citizenship was dealt illustrate the degree to which legal bodies struggle to classify new groups of immigrants in a racial schema that would ultimately determine these immigrants' rights to become American citizens. So, as we go forward, in 1914, Arab Muslims were considered legally white and therefore eligible for naturalized U.S. citizenship. In 1952, the Walter McCarran Act, Asian American exclusion laws were finally revoked 70 years after the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. So, if George Shisham and Wong R. Kim and George Dow, backed by Arab and Asian communities, had not challenged the status quo of who qualifies to be a U.S. citizen, many of us, including yours truly, might have not been able to legally reside in the U.S. and to be deemed basic human provisions such as education, work, medical care, credit, owned property, etc. And of course, as we went over the women's right too, and last month, yeah, these are our change makers. Where are our change makers? Even in current news today, you might be participating in debates about overturning birthright citizenship and whether the Middle Eastern and Northern Africa MENA are white, Asian, Black, or... Finally, in 2024, MENA, or Middle Eastern and North Africans, will be officially included on the 2023 U.S. Census, which leads me back to my original question. Is Jesus white, Asian, Black, or you tell me? And we might not have all of the information to fully grasp what it means what it means to be human in a racialized and religious politics. My theory is that maybe Jesus is like a panda, white, Asian, Black, and he checked all the boxes, including the new Middle Eastern North African category, because he's Jesus, or Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, and that's okay if you don't, checking all the boxes, that would be a total Jesus move. Spreading love, tolerance, patience, and belonging to everyone. Notice I said Jesus, not necessarily Christian. I know there's a variety of Christians out there, and I pray for them all. So Jesus, George Shishim, Wong Ark Kim, and George Dow dared, dared, they dared to think, believe, and do life differently. One person One person can have a major impact and influence on millions and billions of people. And that one person could be you. Are you next to dare to dream life differently? My question to all of you is happy religious holidays and bye for now.